Minnesota sports fans, we know all too well how it feels to sign up for a lifetime of purple pain. Welcome to Before We Die with Jesse and Thor on Purple Daily and Score North.
What's going on, everybody? We're back for your Thursday edition of Before We Die on Purple Daily and Score North. I'm Jesse Pierce. He's Thor Nystrom. He's Ross Brendel. These three guys, they're running three deep. We're going to count on them to bring a victory home for the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football against the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll dive into that contest coming up here in just a little bit. Guys, I want to start off with kind of a hot topic that I heard floating around the Twitter sphere, floating along around the chat rooms, Reddits, what have you. Justin Jefferson, Randy Moss. You know, we love to compare greats to greaters, but I see that comparison starting to be drawn. Is that a fair comparison to put Justin Jefferson and Randy Moss closely together? Are they two completely different players? Is one, still better than the other? Or, what are our thoughts there in general?
It's you can't do apples to apples because they're so different as receivers. Early on in Moss's career, he was so physically dominant, right? Like, you remember the Cowboys game on Thanksgiving where it was like 3 catches for 170 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he would do that sort of stuff. Where Jefferson he has a more fleshed out game, more nuance. You can do more things with him, but he's not going to give you the same amount of explosive plays that Moss did early on. But statistically, Jefferson compares extremely favorably to Randy Moss at this point in their careers, despite being different. I was actually thinking about this a couple nights ago about how Jefferson has elements of games of some of the great players that we've seen. There's some similarities in his game to Moss. There's some similarities in his game to Chris Carter. Like the play where he didn't get his feet down in the end zone in the game on Sunday. He was telling McCardle when he went back to the sideline that, I tried to go dead. Go limp. So you get the feet in, whatever. That some of that stuff that he does reminds me so much of Chris Carter. The hands remind me of Chris Carter, the feel, downfield utility. Some of that reminds you of Moss for sure, but Moss did it in a different way.
Right.
I think his downfield game actually reminds me a bit more of Jerry Rice than Randy Moss. And I know that's another Hall of Fame comparison. I'm not trying to put him in the Hall of Fame right now. That's not what I'm saying. But I think those crossing routes and going over the middle and making guys miss after the catch, that's what Jerry Rice made a living on. And that's what brought him to Canton. Randy Moss didn't do those things as well. Maybe because he just didn't want to, or maybe because he couldn't. But Randy Moss was that just physical specimen that dominated from game one. And the one thing I think about is, so Randy Moss shows up his first game. He has a couple of nice catches. I believe he had at least 1, maybe 2 touchdowns. I believe against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers back in 1998. I believe. I could be wrong on that. So my apologies if I am. Remember,
someone will tell you if you are. Don't worry.
Oh, 100%.
Just let him know in the comments. Come for him. Do it.
Just rip me to shreds in the comments like you already do. Just tear me apart so I can't sleep at night and feel awful about myself. But remember, Justin Jefferson, the first few games of his career with the Vikings in the pass regime, we actually didn't see him a lot. His breakout took a few games into the season. So I find that part interesting. Not that had anything to do with him, but it's really interesting when you make that comparison to Justin Jefferson and Randy Moss now, that perhaps maybe Justin Jefferson game 1 could have had a bit more impact than the Vikings let him show off a few years back. But I liken it more to Jerry Rice, but I also look at it this way. A lot of people say, no, Moss was better. You can't compare him. I say, why not? It's a good thing for him to be compared to players like this. It doesn't mean he is or that he isn't. But just the fact that you're having conversations like this shows a few things. 1, the team is relevant. 1, the team might actually be pretty good. 3, he's good. And oh, by the way, it's fun to talk about these things. Have fun talking about these things. Is he Randy Moss now? I don't believe so. Is he Jerry Rice now? I don't believe so. Can we be talking 10 to 15 years from now about a guy that's going into the Hall of Fame on his first try? Absolutely, I believe that. But we should let it play out a bit more. But he is really, really dang good.
I mean, I'll play the negative Nancy here. I hate comparisons like this. Like, first of all, why can't he just be Justin Jefferson, right? Like, you can pull out similar traits to every single great, and that's exciting for him. And granted, there's that excitement because we haven't seen a receiver like this probably since Randy Moss, right? I mean, you want to have that energy. It's similar to what Kirill Kaprizov is doing with the Minnesota Wild. And yet he's a better player than Marian Gaborik, the one player that he's often compared to in the Wild sphere of things. But I do, like, I always like LeBron and Jordan, Kobe and Jordan, like they're all different players playing at different times against different defenses with different quarterbacks in this instance. Like those comparisons to me, while they are fun, I just think they're kind of all for naught sometimes. Like Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson and he's going to do his thing. And I'm willing to bet that's the approach Justin Jefferson takes on it too, because he seems like the kind of guy that wants to make his name on his terms in his way. So all the more kudos to him. Speaking of our boy JJ, let's talk about him being named Nickelodeon MVP Player of the Week, which is very exciting, only because I love what Nickelodeon's doing with football. They started that last year with the slime zone, end zone type of thing, just as a way to engage more fans, which I think is always important, even at the highest of high NFL level. But that led to a slime off, which Kevin O'Connell said he will always take the slime for the team, something you guys, we would never see Mike Zimmer do in 100 years. I can't even imagine that possibility. I mean, it's just another way that it's speaking to the positive change in the culture in the Minnesota locker room.
It for sure is. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't watch that video that the Vikings put out online where that Jefferson's got the slime, and then O'Connell's like, I'll take this. I'll always take the slime, and then he gets slimed, and then Jefferson's like rubbing it out of his hair and stuff like that, and the whole team's just loving it and hooting and hollering. You couldn't watch that and not compare it to like the Zim when he's grabbing Cousins and shoving him at the end of that game, or some of that different stuff. That the differences in their disposition, it's as striking as the differences in their philosophies on the field. It's polar opposite on all these different levels. But yeah, it was hard to watch that one without sort of getting a tear in your eye when you knew how much the team hated the pass coach.
I think early on, Zimmer, the one that would compliment, remember 2014 Mike Zimmer, the team would lose games and he'd be happy. He'd say, you know what, though, we did good things today. I like the process. Then a few times he was almost more angry when the team won because he didn't like what they did. And he didn't like the process. I think early on, Mike Zimmer might have done that. The last few years of Mike Zimmer, who seemed a little bit beaten down and that he didn't like his roster, maybe didn't like the people that he worked for and didn't agree with any of the decisions, that Mike Zimmer wouldn't have done it. But I do believe early on, Mike Zimmer did show a bit more character than the current or the later version of Mike Zimmer. I want to give props to Nickelodeon too. Yes. One, they're doing a great job connecting kids to football and explaining football to kids.
And second, to me, so that's
and I think to all of us, there's not one person on this pod right now before we die that wouldn't take that slime for any reason. And maybe Thor and I will get to that in about a month or two. We'll talk about that.
I was going to say, I'm disappointed that we didn't include that in our Iowa State, because Thor would have been getting slimed. It would have been glorious. We'll have to remember that's an option for next year or for the Gopher game.
I think Thor and I might be able to pull something off and get the Before We Die in Purple Daily faithful behind with a charity component. But also, did you guys take note of the nice little trophy that Justin Jefferson gets? One, it's like a mini Lombardi trophy, but it's Nickelodeon just did a great job with it. It looks legit, but it's also true to Nickelodeon style, which I thought was just hilarious. Good stuff, and I got a feeling KOC will take that slime a few more times this year. Probably not always for Justin Jefferson, but Thor's convinced me. I was looking at the Viking schedule again last night. Really tough to find more than a few losses, if you can even trick yourself into that.
Which brings me to my next point.
I say that with some jest, by the way.
Always. They're still not going to take it. Brings me to my next point. Vikings Super Bowl odds. Vegas is all in on the Minnesota Vikings. They're looking at a 22-1 to win the Super Bowl, the number 10 team. Odds are 8.5-1 to win the NFC, which means just getting to the Super Bowl. Guys, again, one game. It's been one game. Is it a little too presumptuous to think that these odds are going to remain in the Vikings' favor as highly as they are?
Not at all. In fact, I still think there's a little bit of value on the Vikings right now. In the mathematical models, they are ahead of 10th in the NFL. I think I saw 6th on a few of them, maybe even 5th on a couple. Having them at 10, I just feel like it's still a little bit too low. And by the way, the book that I'm looking at, they have them beneath the Packers and as well for the NFC odds. So I don't know. I think I would have had those flip, but certainly the result last week catapulted the Vikings. They weren't even close to 10th on this odds board last week.
I mean, I think it's one game. I liked what I saw. I will say it again. I said it on Monday in our first episode of Before We Die this week. It's one game. I need to see a little bit more. And that big test is going to come Monday night at Lincoln Field against the Philadelphia Eagles, because they have one of the better defenses. They've got really good, one of the better offenses, not defenses. Take it back, guys. I'm taking it back. I don't think their defense is that great. Their defense is good too, but
the comments are going to light you up.
Oh my goodness. Go for it. I apologize when I make errors. But speaking of then Monday Night Football, Philadelphia Eagles, Thor, Mr. 12 Vikings win over here. What do you have slated for Monday at Philly?
I'm going to take one of the 5 losses that I got the bullets on. It's not going to be any indictment of the Vikings at all if they happen to lose this game, but it's a really tough spot. We had talked about how advantageous the spot was for the opener of getting the Packers in your home stadium for the first game of the O'Connell era, when they don't have tape on any of his schemes, vis-a-vis the Vikings, and they don't have tape on any of the starters because they weren't playing in the preseason. You sort of got to ambush them there. But now everyone's been pumping your tires for the last 5-6 days. You have to turn around, travel out to Philadelphia for this Monday night game. Mm-hmm. This in handicapping parlance, this would be your classic letdown game after an enormous victory. I think it's probably going to be fair. I think it's going to be close. There's a similar line in this game than there was in the Vikings Packers. Vikings currently are underdogs by 2 points. Eagles are favored by 2 points. So Vegas sees it as very, very close. I just think because of the spot, that could be difficult for the Vikings to overcome after they just had that monumental win they did.
I think this is where coaching matters a little bit, to your point, Thor, about, people have been telling you for 5-6 days about how great you are because of your one win. I think a good coach will relay to his team, you're not that great. It was just one win. But I also want to push back a little bit, or challenge you a little bit on just how much tape is going to be out there on the Minnesota Vikings. We probably only saw a quarter of what they're going to run this year, especially because I do think, they would never say this, but I do think when the game got fairly comfortable, the Vikings dialed it back a little bit. Philly is not going to know everything the Vikings are going to attempt to do. Mm-hmm. And I would say, if you really want to get the Vikings faithful behind you, or just those kind of closet on the perimeter Minnesota Vikings fans, go to Philly and win this game. I'm not going to bury you or feel bad if you don't win it, but winning it is a great opportunity to really get people behind you early. But I actually want to circle back to the odds, and how much does it matter that you brought up, Jesse, and should we get behind it? I look at it right now, and I think NFL coaches would tell you this. They kind of view every game as a season to a degree, but a lot of them view the season as month by month. I really still think, for as excited as I now am about the Vikings, and it's more than it was a week ago, I still need to get through 4 or 5 games to really formulate opinions, not just for the Vikings, but for the NFL. Does anybody really think the Bears are going to challenge the Vikings for the division? I don't. I do think the Bears are going to be better than people think they're going to be, but I'm not going to say their one win over San Francisco is going to make them a playoff team. I think we just need to let this all play out. But I do think the Eagles are going to see some stuff that will surprise them a little bit.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. And I will say a win on Monday in Philadelphia will push my meter slightly more toward the favorable Viking side. Because I think it's a totally different game. It's a Monday Night Football game. We'll get to what we need from Kirk Cousins. But I mean, there are a couple things that I think the Minnesota Vikings need to absolutely fix heading in to Monday night's game. First off, the interior offensive line. We talked about it Monday. We know the problems Garrett Bradbury has. We talked about rookie Ed Ingram being kind of an issue, and some of the pass protection being an issue, even in that Green Bay victory. Do we think that Ingram gets that step toward improvement having that first game under his belt? I'm sure there were some jitters, some nerves, and he didn't play horribly. Again, it wasn't like the interior O-line was absolutely terrible. It's just been what it has the past few seasons, which isn't great. So do you guys think that we see an improvement there, namely in rookie Ed Ingram?
Well, Jesse, I told you there will be no Ed Ingram slander on the pod.
Keeping it going.
Yeah. Well, the pass pro stuff is what you want to clean up a little bit. Like you mentioned, there was a couple reps there where he made mistakes. But the run game, like we talked about in the last episode, he was really good there. You go back to the tape, he was moving people. That guy's got dynamite stick for hands, right? Just blowing people backwards. I think the pass pro stuff, to me, that came off as an experiential thing. There's nothing that is beyond his physical capacity. So I do think that that's something that he's going to keep getting better at. And one of the things that I really like from that game, just like if you zoom in, is he was helping out Bradbury, right? Like he in his game behooves Bradbury. He's a power player that can control opponents, whatever. You help him out with Bradbury's guy, he's gonna move that guy in a way that Bradbury can't. Bradbury got stood up a couple times in the run game, then Ingram would come over and just blast someone from the side, the guy that Bradbury was on. All of a sudden he's out of the hole, right? And so that's something new for us, and again it complements Bradbury's game very well, because that ain't what he is good at.
Exactly. And you mentioned the run game. That's my second key to this week against Philadelphia, is the Minnesota Vikings are really going to have to watch that run game. Eagles had 216 rushing yards last week in their victory over the Detroit Lions and had one of the best, if not the best, rushing offense in the NFL last season. I mean, do you think the Vikings, Ingram, namely, again, are up for the task to really focus in on stopping the run game more than anything?
Well, the Eagles did run the ball well. Their run defense, though, stunk against the Lions. They gave up 144 yards to DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift averaged 9.6 yards per carry in that game. They were able to shut down the passing game of the Lions, of course, but that's Jared Goff.
Yeah.
So I think the Eagles right now, they're sitting back there and they're trying to fix some stuff, and vis-a-vis their run defense and their run fits, because again, Swift was just slashing them. But yeah, I think, when you're talking about the passing game, they will definitely have some things ready for the Vikings with blitzes and stuff like that, because they saw some of those pressures that were derived. And some of it was because I had this discussion on Twitter, but there was a big discrepancy between the Vikings pass blocking efficiency numbers and their pass block win numbers. Like they were near the top of the league in one and near the bottom of the league in the other one. And I was trying to ascertain why the enormous difference just for one game. How could they be graded so different? And it appears what it was snaps where Cousins held onto the ball for more than 2.5 seconds, because there's like a cutoff of the pass block win rate, where the pressures would be derived after that. So maybe the Vikings will try to, another counter chess move to what the Eagles are going to want to do, and try to encourage Cousins to get the ball out a little quicker. Well, we'll see about that. But like you mentioned in the last episode, Kirk was showing some better mobility and better movement in the pocket than we had seen in recent seasons. So hopefully he's also ready for that.
And I think Minnesota's going to have the opportunity to expose a weak defense. Not good. I apologize for earlier saying it was good. It's weak. It's not great. It's bad. The Eagles defense is ranked number 21 in defense adjusted value over average, allowing 35 points, 9 of 14 third down conversions and touchdowns in all 4 of Detroit's drives into the red zone last week. So, I mean, huge opportunity for Minnesota, especially when you saw KOC at first really go for it on some of those 4th downs. Do you think he's going to just have to up the ante a little bit and say, yep, we are going to really pressure it, knowing that the defense is a little bit of a soft spot for Philadelphia?
1,000. Yeah, 1,000%. That guy is not afraid. One of the biggest criticisms of Zimmer would be when he would get a lead, he would coach not to lose. Kevin O'Connell, every decision he makes, he is coaching to win the game. Aggressive, and it's all situational. Like they're Scott Frost, the college football coach, he would be selectively aggressive in really weird spots and sort of go YOLO where it wasn't logical. Yeah. Everything that all of O'Connell's decisions, they're from a logical place, and sometimes the logic is going to tell you to do what the public would think would be risky or aggressive, when it's actually just the statistically correct decision to make or to do.
Right.
Yeah, I'm also not one of those people that says never kick a field goal when you're inside maybe the 2, 3, or 4 yard line. I think there are cases where you would do it, depending on where you're at in the game, to take a 2-score lead. Maybe you're doing it at the end of the half to guarantee points.
Maybe you're doing it when you're 64 yards out and you don't want to give the ball to your $1 million man on a
That was
Monday Night
crazy.
Football. Oh my
Yeah.
God. All right. Anyway, sorry. Had to get it out there because I'm still not over it. Still
That
not
was-
over what I
that was-
witnessed on
that was
Monday.
crazy. That was actually
But-
crazy.
But my point being, if you go for it on 4th and goal from the 2.5 and you don't get it, more than likely, if your defense only allows 1 or 2 first downs after that, or a 3 and out, you're going to get the ball back already in scoring position or near it. So that's why I'm in favor of going for it more often than not, thinking, okay, so I missed out on 3 this time because I didn't get it, but the next time I get the ball back, I'm hoping we're going to score a touchdown. So it's still a net gain.
Right.
I'm in favor of going for it as often as you want when it makes sense. I'll preface that because I know there'll be some comments of, well, why don't you kick the field goal here? And I get that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying more often than not, our guy Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. Touchdowns win games.
Yep.
More often than not, unless it's a field goal as time expires,
Mhm.
field goals don't really win you games. They often prevent you from winning.
I mean, they would have helped Iowa beat the Cyclones last weekend because they didn't cross the plane on that
Unbelievable.
first rush. It just never
Unbelievable.
ends. Never ends.
We should have also
Molotov.
had a clause in that bet that you can't bring it up afterwards.
I did. Still didn't cross the
Molotov
plane.
cocktails.
Didn't cross
Jesse's
the
just
plane.
lobbing them from the street still.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Amazing. I'm all
Yeah.
on it. Yeah, no, and again, that goes to my last key, I think, for the Vikings to win is just keeping that pressure on. Ross, you had mentioned it earlier. I mean, we saw them kind of let up in that second half against Green Bay because it looked like the win was already theirs and he's keeping some things in the pocket. But I don't think you're going to have that opportunity in Philadelphia. I think you're going to have to keep attacking, which, as Adam Thielen said they said it on Monday, he's never been a part of an offense that's able and willing to do that. So I'm excited to see what else. Do you guys think that maybe they are going to mix in Dalvin Cook and some of the run game a little bit more too, or do you think they're going to keep with having a very heavier pass game against the Eagles?
I think they're gonna be watching that tape of Eagles Lions and seeing DeAndre Swift do whatever he wants to do. Yeah, you can bet that Dalvin is a key part of this game plan for sure. They're gonna force the Eagles to prove that they can stop him before they flower it out. I think Madison will have success in this game too. I don't think you need to give Cook 35 touches, but they're absolutely going to test that Eagles run defense early and often.
Yeah, and Thor, that's what I'm interested to see is what do they do with the running back rotation. I don't know if I would call it a true rotation against the Packers, but I know at least for me, and I do like Alexander Madison, but I think we saw more of him than I was expecting to. And again, just a hunch is I think that they're doing that to try and keep Cook as fresh as possible and maybe prevent some of those injuries that have cost him games here and there. Because, not trying to be negative, but it does kind of seem like a given that Dalvin Cook's going to miss a few games. He does, I think, well, not think, we know every season. So I'm thinking that that's what they want to do to try and, Thor's like, no, he never misses.
Not this year. We ain't going to jinx him.
Well, and maybe they won't because of, trying to work on the workload a little bit. So I want to see if that continues week 2 against the Eagles, how much we see Madison in comparison to how much we see Cook. I do expect to see them both active in the passing game again, which I think is fun.
Well, I love that you brought that up because I was going to bring that up as well. Alexander Madison playing and getting significant rotation in last week against the Packers, and you guys are both right. I think likely to do so against Philadelphia. Does that change your mind? Earlier, before the season even started, there was the rumors about teams calling on Alexander Madison and trade him, and I think a lot of people were kind of okay with that idea. Does that change your guys' opinion at all on that? I mean, obviously, I love the idea of having him there because he's a very capable back. Plus, to keep Dalvin Cook healthy, I think is imperative. I mean, do you guys like that idea more or still kind of like meh? Because again, just rumors, just calls, they're happening all the time. But it seemed like there was some traction to that possibility.
They made the correct decision. Unless I don't think there's any chance that they got offered a 3rd round pick. I think a trade would have happened then. But I also don't think that they got a 4th round offer either. And when you don't, you can keep Madison for this coming season. He's going to sign with someone else in the off season. The Vikings are probably going to get a 6th round comp pick when he leaves, might even get a 5th though. If you look at the formula, it's based both on signing bonus, but also percentage of snaps that the guy takes the next year. So it'll kind of change whatever. The Gronklin, as we call him, signed with the Jets over the offseason. Right now, the Vikings are projected to get a 5th-round pick for him. I think it's pretty reasonable to think that Madison could garner as much or more in the free market that Conklin did, and to a team that is going to be playing him all the time. So you're going to recoup that draft pick on the back end. And we're already seeing his utility for this season. He's already showing that for this isolated one season, that's a value in and of itself, being on the roster. He can do a whole bunch of different things that we hope that Nwangu and Ty Chandler can do down the road. And the coaching staff is developing them and towards that same idea. But for right now, Madison is a clearly superior back to both those guys. And one of the other changes sort of the equation of how a lot of people were talking about it before, the Vikings now are a legitimate NFC contender. They're a legitimate playoff contender. And so whereas before you were like, oh, why would you keep a backup running back on a 500 team or whatever? It's like having a closer on a 500 team. The Vikings are going to be better than that. And as we see with O'Connell as well, the way that he uses the different players' skill sets, not just the starters, the backups as well, it's so smart. So he's going to put Madison into advantageous situations all season as well.
Yeah, and to Thor's point, the more Madison plays, the more of a compensation pick you would get for him.
Yeah.
So there is that element to it. And I also think at this point, if they didn't trade him before week 1 of the season, they would have to get an insanely good offer to trade him now before week 8 of this season and feel really comfortable with what they have behind him. So I think the odds of him moving at this point are incredibly low.
Yeah,
in the words of the great Canadian philosopher Justin Bieber, you never say never, but I also don't think it's very likely at all.
Did you just toss in a Justin Bieber?
I did.
Wow.
Hate comment me below. Hate comment below.
That's not even his best song. I mean, geez. All right, we'll try to move past that.
Well, that'll be the next episode. We'll rank Bieb's songs.
I will fight to forever for Justin Bieber.
Oh man, we're just losing followers every single time we speak. Every time we open our mouths, people are like, these people are the worst in the world. But this is a good transition, a little segue to They Said It. I found a quote. So we started this new segment last week where we're finding quotes from rivals, from the team, whatnot, and kind of breaking them down. Justin Jefferson, not to make the show all about Justin Jefferson, but probably the entire season is going to be all about Justin Jefferson, let's be honest. So A.J. Brown, top receiver, who probably would have been the top receiver last week had Justin Jefferson not outdone him, said this on JJ. Soon he'll be one of the highest paid receivers to ever play the game. He's a special talent, and I know we got our hands full with trying to stop him. Now, we all know he is a special talent, and we all know the Eagles are going to struggle to stop him. What I really found interesting about that is highest paid receiver to ever play the game. How tight and tense do you think Vikings brass wallets are right now hearing something like that? Because they are going to have to pony up a pretty penny to lock in Jefferson for the long term in the very near future.
I do have one quibble with this quote. I would swap out the word receiver for non-quarterback. He is going to be one of the highest paid players of all time. Whenever he signs that extension, the only people that are going to be north of him are the quarterbacks. He's already the best receiver in football, and the guy's 23? He is going. They're going to, of course, the Vikings are going to have to back up the Brinks trucks and are going to do so happily. But it's not just that he's going to be the highest paid receiver, which you could argue that if there wasn't such a thing as rookie contracts, Jefferson should be paid as the highest paid receiver already. But certainly when that contract runs up, that's what's going to happen.
And I know Jefferson was asked by media recently saying, what do you think about the contract? And his response, quote unquote, was I'm focused on the season. That's not my goal, which you love to hear, right? I know us Minnesotans, we love a guy that wants to be here. Hopefully they can find the money to do so, which they should be able to. But first things first, let's get to that Super Bowl chances, increase them. I'm still on a solid 9-8, guys. I told you, maybe I'll increase those odds myself if they win.
Come on.
I can't.
How are you going to be at 9-8 after where you
not drinking the full Kool-Aid yet? I can't do it. I just can't. Someone's got to be realistic on this podcast. And
I don't think that's realistic.
So it's not
I don't think it's realistic. 12-5 is realistic.
Do you think? All right. Final question for the good of the group too. Circling back as we get to before our dies, can Kirk Cousins be the Kirk Cousins you need him to be on Monday Night Football, primetime football in Philadelphia? Is he going to go back into what we've seen Kirk Cousins do in such games?
That's the beauty of having this game in week 2. We'll find out. We get to find out early in the season. I don't know. I got a hunch the team's going to play well. Doesn't mean they're going to win the game, but I got a feeling it'll be a good game, which of course would happen to mean that Kirk Cousins logically is probably playing pretty well in the game for that to happen. So I'm hopeful it won't be one of those Monday night games where the team loses and you can point to one person as the reason why. I'm hoping that that's not the case, but I think we'll get good Kirk Cousins in prime time. I really do.
All right, Thor's gonna just remain moot on the subject. You don't?
No, I mean, well, first of all, do I think he's going to have a solid performance? Yeah, I do, because he's such a perfect fit for this system, and because the weapons are so ridiculous. But I would also say, like, I want to prematurely push back against the narrative of like, if he throws an interception or whatever, where people are going to be like, oh, he's not good on primetime games. It's like, this is a whole new season with a whole new scheme. He no longer has restrictor plates slapped onto his tires like he did in the offense with nepotism, Kubiak and Zimmer and all those different guys. If he has, a downish game compared to the last one, I don't think we should, start up the whole narrative again of he's bad in primetime games or whatever.
But they will. So that's,
we're not putting too much weight on it.
Nah, there you go. I like it. Now, as we close up this episode, speaking of next week's Monday episode will actually be on Tuesday following Monday Night Football. So please be sure to recall that. But before I die, I will slime Thor due to a Cyclone victory over the Iowa Hawkeyes. That is my before I die. I have like a couple more days to live this out before they both play new games and it doesn't matter anymore.
Well, my before I die is Ross is getting slimed when the Iowa Hawkeyes go into the bank and upset the Gophers, and it's going to require an upset. I ran my numbers last night, and they were projecting Minnesota as almost a touchdown favorite at home against Iowa. But I still believe, and Ross and I are going to make a slime bet, and you are going to see Ross get slimed.
I kind of want to slime Ross just for the Bieber take alone, but like that's neither here nor there.
We could play Bieber in the background, incorporate the whole deal.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think before we die, Justin Bieber's gonna blow the horn before a Vikings game. That would actually be sweet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And a rill before we die. I got a rill before we die. Okay. There will be a Deion Sanders like player who plays in Major League Baseball and the NFL in the same season. We'll see another one.
Russell Wilson.
Okay.
I think Russell's probably too old for it now. Kyler Murray's probably too old for it now.
Kyler could have done it.
But
I did not appreciate Kyler Murray's slow start last week. It really killed my fantasy numbers.
Oh, of
course.
Was
really but I had Kareem Hunt and I had a good Steelers defense. I won.
Blast Jesse in the comments for telling us all about her fantasy football team.
I want to know. Don't worry. My kid's soccer team is 1-0 too. I'm pretty much the undefeated person. So bringing winning to this podcast one way or another. Wow. Cyclones are also 1-0 against the Hawkeyes. So don't forget, again, this is Before We Die. I'm Jesse Pierce. He's Thor Nystrom. He's Ross Brendel. Maybe we'll all be back next week. Maybe it'll just be me. We'll change the show to winning or something like that. But you guys are the best. Leave your comments below. Again, we will have next week's episodes on Tuesday instead of Monday. So it'll be Tuesday, Thursday. Stay tuned and go Vikes.
Skol.